morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure that you're familiar with True Magazine, which in written form presents, just as we do with films, the real adventures of real people. Our guest tonight is the editor of True Magazine, Mr. Douglas Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy takes us on his own personal safari to Africa to search for and find Africa's ugly prima donna, the rhinoceros, specifically a world's record rhino horn. This mammoth on a rampage has been known to destroy small native villages and even to derail a train. Join us now for Rhino.
Bold Journey, your television passport to the exciting, colorful world of... Begin tonight's true story adventure is Jack Douglas.
The encyclopedia defines the rhinoceros as a creature with little intelligence and bad temper. And hunters returning from a safari in Africa will invariably say that the rhino is one of the stubbornest, most cantankerous, and downright meanest beasts in the world. Now, these ponderous denizens, second largest land animal on Earth, will, for no apparent reason, go into a mad charge, hurling themselves against anything even momentarily considered an enemy. This dangerous animal was the lure which took our guest tonight to the Dark Continent. A colorful man with a colorful background, expert on the rhino, it's my sincere pleasure to introduce the editor of True Magazine, Mr. Douglas Kennedy of New York City. Hi, editor. Welcome to our series.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure, sir. Tell us about True Magazine, specifically about your association with this fine publication.
Well, Jack, I've been with True for about 5 years now. As you know, it's the largest selling man's magazine in the world. And, gee, I think it's the world's best job, too.
When you say large, just how big? Would you give our audience an idea?
Well, it's 2.5 million circulation right now, and it's getting bigger every day.
All right. Now, Mr. Kennedy, why rhino? Why go all the way to Africa to get a record rhino horn? Why did it mean so much to you?
Well, 2 reasons. First, for the same reason that a mountaineer goes climbing because it's there. And secondly, because it's the most dangerous animal in the world, and I wanted to do it the hard way.
Now, Mr. Kennedy, how do we determine a record size of a rhino?
It's the length of the horn, Jack. It's, well, when you see this one, you'll see a real whopper.
The rhinos are found all over Central Africa, west and south of Nairobi. Let's start with Nairobi, where we have landed by plane, having flown in from New York. Nairobi is a unique city surrounded by game preserves. Heavy Moorish influence here. Many Muslims live in Nairobi. We take off from this modern restaurant.
And there's Bob Halmy, who's my partner on this trip and a photographer for the magazine.
The last drink of soda pop, and we're off for Rhino, and come what may. We meet the lorry with our gear and native helpers outside of town. We have 2 cars and the 1 lorry in our group. We're after a world record rhino, which has been spotted near Matawumbo. In Africa, you're liable to run into all sorts of roadblocks. The roads are teeming with game, and here we run into a little zebra trouble. He likes the road about as well as we do. We just stand by until he gets out of our way.
Mr. Kennedy, are you able to go out into these preserves and away from Nairobi without government permission? Do you have to take along experienced guides?
Well, Jack, you have to get clearance to go anywhere in British Africa. They're very particular and careful about their game control, and rightly so, I believe. Heading south on a Maasai cattle track, and the going gets a little rougher. Really heavy-duty trucks that we're driving here to go across country this way.
There are more kinds of antelope in Africa than in any other part of the world. There must be at least 50 varieties, at least 4 in that herd you're looking at. Thompson's gazelle, wildebeest, hartebeest, and dik-dik. Amazingly graceful animals and fast. They've got to be. They are prey of the lion, and their only defense is to outrun him. The lion can beat the gazelle over a short spurt, but the gazelle can outrun him over a distance. Any sudden noise sends them scampering off.
They're not going to wait around and make sure, are they?
They are very, very touchy. Bob has spotted some animals that aren't so touchy. A whole pride of lion. and they are not scared of man or beast.
Don't worry about him, Jack. He's on the roof of the car, and our white hunter is directly below him with guns. These are young males, a whole dozen of them, all part of probably 2 families, and they're sort of on the prowl, but you notice their bellies are a little full. He's eyeing a hartebeest now and starts after her. The hartebeest darts out. She's not taking any chances. The lion says, "Oh, well, I had a good breakfast anyway." They obviously had just eaten their fill.
Mr. Kennedy, have any true stories come across your desk of a lion fighting an elephant, taking on an elephant?
Jack, if it's happened, we'd like to publish it. But all the animals in Africa have a great deal of respect for each other. For instance, the wildebeest will mix in with other animals, and they will stay clear of each other, and they'll stay clear of Bob here, too. This particular animal roams Africa like the buffalo used to in our Great Plains in America. These animals, the wildebeest, or the gnu for crossword puzzle fans, is absolutely useless.
We closed in on them to check the number of varieties there. You'll find gnu, antelope, and zebra running together, even rhino. Uh-oh, there he comes. There's our first rhino. He's the one animal that left that herd to charge us, just to drive us away.
We're setting up our first camp under the shade of that big acacia tree. Bob is sort of a traffic director at this particular point. Right in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro in the background. It's just tremendous scenery here. And unlike Hemingway's early days in Africa, it's not quite as rugged as it used to be. We get our laundry done every day, our washing, and they even iron my BVDs here, which I'd never got service like that in New York.
We even have a hot bath from water heated in the campfire. Bob looked altogether too comfortable. I just couldn't resist this with cold water.
That must have felt good.
Well, Bob is a good sport.
This food that we got on this particular trip was as good as any I've ever eaten. This native chef had been on safaris for 20 years, and he knew how to bake bread, well, such as Mother used to make 50 years ago. He there puts it in the oven and right on the hot coals, and I tell you, that was good eating. And I had bagged what meat we needed to eat, and the native boys cure it in the sun. Wonderful duck shooting here, bigger than our mallard and teal in America. Bread's baked now. Great eating.
We sat down in pretty luxurious comfort here. An icebox and a radio. Here I am, the biggest pig on the trip, just to, keep my strength up.
Now this is a gag. Nile perch can be found in the nearby rivers, and Bob went down to fish with the rod we bought from Nairobi. He casts, waits, then looks around across the stream. Directly across, a Cape buffalo had come down to drink. He took one look and lit out for the bush. Bob raced right into camp. I told Bob to run fast here to make it look good.
Along with us on the trip, we had a little pet rhesus monkey named Nicky. And like all babies, they sometimes want to eat and sometimes they don't. But unlike most babies, this one traveled well. We like to let him believe that he was actually steering the car, and he was good fun.
Well, we're after rhino, and we found one right here. It's a remarkable animal. Only animal in nature that will attack without provocation. And we treat it very carefully. I'm standing there back guarding our white hunter and Bob with a gun. The rhino sees very poorly. He can only see things in motion. That's probably why he's been known to charge anything. He just doesn't see exactly what it is that he's charging. But he does have marvelous hearing. He can hear a twig break 100 yards away from him in any direction. And he has a sharp sense of smell. The skin is almost 2 inches thick. The baby rhino stays with its mother until it's 2 years old. Then it takes off on its own. They eat thorn bushes. They're strict vegetarians. They feed mostly at night and travel as much as 25 miles a night grazing. They can go for days without water, getting all they need from the thorn bushes. Here at Namango, the game warden says that a rogue rhino is on the rampage. He is located about 100 miles south of us toward Arusha. This rogue rhino has been wounded and had driven some Maasai people from their boma. He had to be brought down, and our party was asked to do the job. We agreed. And we have to get our guns very, very carefully taken care of. Every day we clean them, morning and night. They're called elephant guns. Look at the size of those bullets, 458s. And we're now in this Maasai village that has been deserted. This rhino has driven these people out. In fact, he's killed a couple of their cattle. There's a warden back of us there. He went along with us on the trip. The boys have found a place where that rhino just went charging right into a hut there, one of the Maasai hut. And they're on the track now. They've got it. That direction. And we set out on foot this time. From here on, it's all hard work. And we set out one gun in the back. I'm the tail end Charlie there. You always carry a gun in front and a gun in back. You're always prepared in Africa. They're the fresh rhino track, and we know it's the one we're after. He's a loner around here. You have to make your approach on an animal like this very carefully. Look at the size of that track. That's about 12 inches. You remember I told you his smell is very acute, and his hearing is acute. Hal checks the wind. We want the wind to blow from him toward us, not vice versa. We're going right through a rhino tunnel here now. Those wait-a-bit bushes, those thorn bushes are really brutal. They can tear your skin. And that's actually what the rhino eats. Maybe that's why he's so rambunctious. There he is. There he is. An ugly brute. Mamu warns us to be quiet.
Now, that's a very mean animal, Jack, and he has done a lot of damage, and it's really up to us to get rid of him. He's heading right toward us. The killing shot on a rhino is right in the forehead. You can't make a heart shot, and Hal doesn't want to miss, and he doesn't want to take any chances. And here he comes. Look at that kick on that gun. Well, we got him. Our white hunter here is a very famous man in Africa, although he happens to be an American. He's one of two that belong to this very exclusive club.
After an animal is down, particularly one this dangerous, you really approach very warily. Look at the size of that horn. 20 inches. Bob points out the bullet holes right where Hal wanted them. The rogue would rampage no more. Still heading after our world record rhino, we're looking for the biggest horn in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. In a moment, part 2 of your true story adventure.
En route south, we came into one of the most astonishing spectacles I had ever seen. I've seen forest fires in this country, but out here, everything blows up all of a sudden. It's just like an explosion on this great veld. And we decided to head right into it. And you can see we're maybe being a little foolhardy, but golly, it was just irresistible to come down to see this thing.
I thought there might be a story in the magazine for it. We get here a little close. Those flames, incidentally, are 50 feet high, and they just come at you with this tremendous roar. We tried to measure the speed of this fire. We figured it was coming at us at about 20 miles an hour, absolutely under no control at all.
Why, that's just an inferno, isn't it?
Well, it just covered the whole horizon, Jack, and here is rather a sad spectacle. A whole herd of zebra just completely bewildered. They don't know which way to go, and of course nothing panics an animal more than fire, as you know. It was really a very sad sight. Now, this wildebeest, it's hard to believe an animal like that could go 50 miles an hour, but that's what we clocked him at. There's a whole herd of stampeding buffalo. And at this particular juncture, we decided we'd better get out of there, too, because it was getting a little too hot for us. Well, we continue on our way, Jack, out of the area where we'd gotten our rogue rhino. But en route, as you well know, Africa offers many, many diversions.
We roll into a Okama village. They're wonderful, carefree, happy people. They dance all day long. There's the chief with the drum there. He wears dark glasses, too. That's sort of a sign of honor, I guess. The Okambas are one of the most vivid tribes in Africa. For them, the dance is a big combination. It's part sport, part religion, part relaxation. This dance, for them, takes the place of rock and roll, golf, tennis, and even church. This particular dance is actually a fertility ceremony. They're really praying to have strong, healthy children. We came across another strange sight. Africa is just so full of these fascinating sights.
And here's Bob, my intrepid photographer, shoes and socks and all, heading right out into Lake Manyara, and in just a minute you'll see another amazing spectacle of Africa. This is the traveling season for these flamingos. Thousands and thousands of flamingos just filling the sky. Actually, the game count on these things goes up into the millions. It may seem hard to believe, but millions of birds here.
When you find water, you may find elephant nearby. Though the rhino needs little water, the elephant must have lots of it to bathe in and to survive. His skin will dry and crack unless he bathes regularly, which they do by instinct. The elephant is, in a sense, a blood brother of the rhino. They're the two biggest animals left, and Bob can't resist getting up close here. I'm covering him, but if they ever decided to come at us, believe me, whatever cover I could supply would be sort of wasted. The elephant is a formidable and dangerous animal. He will charge you just like the rhino, but with one important difference. You have to provoke him. Obviously, we'd provoked this big tusker, and we are charged. We move out of there, but fast.
The Courageous Cowards Club has just departed.
Well, Jack, discretion is often the better part of valor.
It certainly is, sometimes.
Now, we ran into here a man named Bill Taylor. This is how he makes his living. He catches animals for zoos, and this particular day, he was out after giraffe. Catching a giraffe is no mean feat, as you'll see in just a minute. You have to get a noose on the end of a long pole, and you have to chase that graceful and very fast animal across the plains. You pick out a young one, and you just cut loose, and here we go. 40 miles an hour to get that young giraffe. He's about 1.5 years old, and Bill is a very thoughtful and careful game catcher. He decided that we'd run this animal a little too hard, and he might be injured, particularly in captivity, and the boy with the pole there is trying to unloosen the noose. We finally did, and then an astonishing thing happened. This animal became enamored of us. We couldn't get rid of him. Taylor just tried to drive him away, and he just stood there and looked at us. Finally, somebody got the bright idea. It's remarkable what a horn sound will do to drive animals away. You can talk to him, you can scream at him, but the horn finally sent him away. Now, this ostrich chase, on the other hand, was considerably more successful and even faster. This was almost at 60 miles an hour. That noose loosens very quickly. You don't want to injure the animal, and you put the blindfold on him so he won't be panicked. And you stay very, very clear of those. That's Taylor, the big fellow in the foreground. You stay clear of those long feet because they can really kick. But see how gently they handle it? This group of pictures we sent to an advertising friend of ours back to New York, and it appeared in that advertisement there. We're coming in now, Jack, to the Maasai village near where this record rhino was found. These Maasai are astonishing people. The British have never been able to subjugate them in the way they have other tribes. They haven't really tried to. They just never made peace with the British. And with those spears there, they actually go out and hunt lion. They use it less as throwing, more as defense.
Surely.
When a rhino charges or a lion charges, they just put the other end into the ground. Bob makes friends with his camera, and I used to be an old javelin thrower in college, and
You're rusty, editor.
Well, Jack, I'm not as good as they are, I'll tell you that. But that's, you know, that spear is about 8 times as heavy as a javelin. Now, we've been told that about 10 miles down the line, 4 days ago, this big record rhino was spotted. And we have to get out on foot here, no protection from a car, and start stalking. Mamu, our chief tracker there, was a remarkable man. He could follow anything. And Mamu suspects that right around the corner there, well, Bob is just about on it right now. And there, it's a she. There she is with a feeding toto. Toto is a term for any small animal in Africa, or any child animal. And Bob is now pretty much in seventh heaven. Look at the size of that horn, Jack. It's really an astonishing sight. That's at least twice as big as any that you've seen previously. And wait till she turns around now, you get a real look. Isn't that amazing? We measured later by photographic means, and, well, that one was 50 inches, and here's a little 3-inch one on the toto. 50 inches, Jack. That's about 10 inches longer than the world record. Actually, the female rhino grows a bigger horn than the male, probably because she doesn't attack as many things. There she is, getting a little morsel of that tough thorn bush that she eats. Well, Jack, we've gotten the pictures we want, and we head back home, back to New York, back to the magazine business, but we have 2 really great stories. The rogue rhino that we had to kill, and the record rhino that we captured on film.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. We mentioned earlier that the rhino has a bad temper, he's cantankerous, and yet here on our own program series, we've had at least several films in which we have seen people. I recall the young man who plays Tarzan, for example, who actually rode a rhino, and this was in Africa. Now, how do you explain this contrast between the 2 stories we've been getting?
Well, Jack, I've done a little rhino riding myself. The fellow you saw there that was the game catcher, he has a tame baby one at home, and if you catch them young enough, like any animal, well, they become very affectionate, and this fellow is very good.
In other words, they can be domesticated, but until they're domesticated, look out. Is that it?
Roger.
Let's leave rhinos now and get back to a question that's perhaps purely selfish to our program. I know you're familiar with it. You've appeared with us now. We've had, I think, as our audience will agree, many interesting people who have interesting true stories. And now, editor, how would they go about getting the written stories to True Magazine? Are you interested? What do they have to do?
Jack, in the trade, I'm known as Available Doug. We like to have true stories of interest to men. And, of course, a great many of the people who have appeared on your program have the kind of stories we're looking for. Just send them to me. I'm in the telephone book or by mail, or call me up.
I know that you want true stories. Your magazine title stands for that, obviously. But is the emphasis on an unusual ending? Is it on action? Is it on something dramatic? What?
We like completed stories, stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. In other words, if a fellow goes treasure hunting and he has some exciting adventures all along the way, that's well and good. But if he doesn't find treasure, we don't want it.
I see. Mr. Kennedy, we're going to remember that as we meet more and more interesting people like yourself on our programs. I hope you won't mind if we say, you contact Available Doug Kennedy, he'd like to have your story. We'll do that sincerely, and I hope that you'll give them a reading. I know you will.
I sure will, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, and our thanks also to True Magazine. We appreciate you coming all the way out here to see us.
I appreciate being here.
Thank you, sir.